So I've just done just come off my this morning stream, so you'll have to forgive me if I sound a bit. I've been literally talking non-stop for 2 hours, and I'm probably going to have another non-stop hour talk now as I record my next two videos. You'll excuse me if I imbibe a lot of water or juice during that time while doing this video. So, as you may remember, of course, Badenoch and Patel had a bit of a falling out very recently. Now, as of this moment in time, nothing too much has really come of it. Yes, they've had a bit of a falling out. Not really, too surprising. Most people could maybe put it down to a bit of a gaffe, but of course, we don't know what was being said behind the scenes. And unfortunately, we probably may never know really what gets behind the scenes. It might, of course, end up coming out in a book, maybe about in a couple of years' time, about how the Tory party, dissolved. And, they talk to insiders and they find out what happened in this exact moment. But it is very, very interesting to ask and ponder the question, why on earth, if you were Badenoch, why on earth are you bringing Patel or Priti Patel into your shadow cabinet? After all, most conservatives would consider her tenure as Home Secretary to be absolutely disastrous, and that she was dispatched back to the shadow realm, or should we say the backbenchers, where pretty apt that she doesn't and should never hold any political power or political office because she's just inept and she's just bad at doing her job. You might talk a big game, but when it came to actually, walking the walk, well, she was pretty bad. So why has, Patel, or at least Badenoch, been embracing Patel so closely on this? It's an interesting question, and I am glad to go over to Conservative Home and actually say I'm not the only one asking that question. But it turns out our good T-boy, our good friend Will over on Conservative Home, is also asking that very same question over on there. So we're going to have a look at what Will's had to say and what he thinks, because this is kind of interesting seeing someone from a conservative point of view asking a very similar question as well to what's going on here. So we're going to see what Will has to say about this little relationship going on between Badenoch and Patel. After all, Patel wasn't exactly well liked when she left, of course, the Home Office. She didn't do very well in the leadership contest either. So we'll find out and see what he's got to say. But as always, before we do go getting into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. There are the Pony Club, the YouTube thank you button, the Patreon page, and of course, there's the Buy Me Coffee link where you can, buy me coffee. So, as always, thank you very much to everyone who does help and support the channel. Even if you do, just click the like and share button, it all helps. So, let's crack on then in today's adventure, shall we? So, Badenoch, Patel's record, if Badenoch knew Patel's record was so disastrous, so why has she hugged her so close? So he begins. In light of, by Twitter common consensus, one of the worst political interviews of all time, it is good to ask why Kimmy Badenoch made Priti Patel the shadow foreign secretary in the first place. And of course, this is still the fallout of that interview. And that interview she did with the Sun, yeah, it was very, very bad. Very, very bad indeed. So having, of course, only won votes of only 14 MPs, and only in only one round of last year's leadership election that she survived, Patel was hardly the biggest rival that Badenoch needed to actually placate. Her decision to offer her more than a senior job, more than any other, more successful candidates, now needlessly irritated many. More importantly, it meant her shadow foreign secretary had some serious baggage attached. And that's very true. Very, very true. It's what we've been saying, before we went in here. Patel has a lot of baggage. She isn't seen by even other conservatives. As you can see here, by Will asking this question, she is not very good. So why has she been brought in? That is the question. So Will continues. When Patel's political obituary comes, of course, to be written sooner than she might actually hope. Oh, that's not a very good sign from Will. She will, of course, be remembered for two things: being sacked as International Development Secretary for meeting with Israeli officials without Prime Minister approval. Of course, yeah, remember that. Setting her own foreign policy without, anyone asking anyone else. And of course, for presiding over the introduction of our most liberal immigration system ever, with very disastrous consequences at the ballot box. Again, why was that immigration system implemented in the first place? Oh, that's right. It was because of Brexit, because we need immigration in this country. Boris Johnson didn't want to say it out loud, but he did what he was always intended to do. So, when, of course, confronted by Harry Cole, with the graph now of immigration explosion, the so-called Boris wave that occurred under her at the Home Office, Patel obviously had two options. She could either hold her hands up and say and follow her leader's example and offer an apology, however heartfelt or even career-defining cock-up it would be, or she could be unrepentant, unwilling to admit that she wasted her 3 years. Guess which direction she took. Guess which direction Pretty Patel decided to take. It's pretty obvious, and she didn't apologize if you haven't seen the clip. She, of course, chose the latter route. Watch, I dare you. I recommend doing so from behind the sofa. Oof. That's not very good, is it? Anyway, Patel now has since sought to try and clarify her comments. Even if sorry does remain the hardest word, it is no use. People voted to leave for a variety of reasons, as our proprietors poll reminds us. But no one doubts that a desire to control and reduce migration was central. That's what Boris Johnson's landslide winning 2019 manifesto promised, which Patel was then tasked to implement. Promised many other things as well, but there you go. And like I say, didn't exactly implement anything else too much either. It's almost like Boris Johnson and all the people he chose in that cabinet were absolutely incompetent. But of course, Will can't come to that conclusion because he's a conservative, of course. So she had one job and she screwed it up spectacularly. Net migration in 2019, the year she became Home Secretary, was 184,000. Still far higher than anything Britain had known before. Tony Blair had entered Downing Street. But by 2022, the year Liz Truss dumped her from the Home Office, it had quadrupled to 764,000. A year later, it was 906,000 by about the population of Cyprus. That, of course, is the case of misunderstanding the brief. There's now far more damning, consequential, and embarrassing than anything Lord Sugar's latest ban of Marie puppets could ever manage. Leaving aside now its ruinous consequences for our housing crisis, social services, infrastructure, public finances, and more, this represented a fundamental breach with our voters, and we treated them like idiots. I would also say, even if you are having, that kind of influx of immigration, how high was the birth rate in the UK during those years? As just a matter of interest. But also, what about the housing crisis, the services, the infrastructure, the public finances? Public finances, immigrants actually contribute a lot to public finances. They pay taxes, especially if you get them in by legal routes. But, it's so much more, as always. It comes down to blaming immigration. Blaming immigration. That's not what happened here on this. But there you go. Anyway, hold on a second. Anyway, and we're back. So, yeah. It does raise a lot of questions why Badenoch would bring in Patel if she's got such a disastrous record. But maybe it's exactly like Suella Braverman. You know, why was Suella Braverman constantly elevated into like key positions in the government? It was because she was actually quite influential. Remember, the only reason Rishi Sunak won against Boris Johnson was because apparently of Suella Braverman's intervention, getting the right wing of the Tory party to back him rather than Boris, meaning that there was no leadership contest because Rishi knew he wouldn't be able to win it. So maybe it's something similar. Maybe it is something similar like that. But we'll see if what Will speculates about, of course, maybe in a moment as well. So reports will, of course, differ as to who exactly the guilty men and women were of the Boris wave are. Was it Rishi Sunak as part of the Treasury brained attempt to now bump up growth figures, driven by post COVID inflation, to avoid, of course, paying social care workers more? Was it Boris Johnson to apologise to his brother for backing leave and to get invited back to FT lunches? Was it actually Patel, obviously his Home Secretary? As I outlined back in the Telegraph, I suspect that it was a collective cock up. In my experience, most things in politics are explained by a combination of incompetence, laziness, and a total lack of foresight. Well, that's not what Will was saying during the Boris years. That's not what Will was saying during the Boris years at all. Will had total faith and enthusiasm for extolling the virtues during the Boris years. And yet now, well, it's a total lack of turnaround now, isn't it? And maybe if it is that's the case, it was a combination of incompetence, laziness, and a total lack of foresight. How does he know that those things still are not a problem within his party? Oh, that's right, because he didn't actually ask the question. Anyway, a full investigation, of course, into the disaster and a list of those who we can throw tomatoes at is essential. Fortunately, about 70% of my friendship group seems to be working on it. Either way, Patel was the Home Secretary in charge of scrapping a migration target, junking the 30,000 minimum salary threshold, loosening the requirements for overseas students and their dependents, and of course, dicking about with, of course, the control rods and unleashing our immigration Chernobyl. The book, of course, stopped with her, and the graph that Harry Cole showed her does remain her political epitaph. Now, of course, Patel seems to wish to try and gaslight the electorate rather than confront the reality of her foul up. He claims that only, quote, the best and brightest were coming in is nonsense. In the first 6 months of last year alone, there were 4 dependents for every healthy care worker arriving. And that's for workers from Zimbabwe. That was 1,000 for every healthcare visa, likely minimum wage, brought in about 10,000 dependents. Even without her stimulus, even without a simultaneous failure to prevent the small boats crossings from surging after she promised to make them totally non-viable, Patel's fiasco represented a fundamental breach of trust with our 2019 voters. Research by both Onward and the Centre for Policy Studies have now both found migration to be one of, if not the number one reason for our defeat last summer. Again, it was more than just immigration. It was way more than just immigration. For the fact that, again, I wouldn't really trust Onward because it's a Michael Gove-backed think tank. And the Centre for Policy Studies, well, again, pretty, pro-conservative, pro-right-wing. So, again, wouldn't really fully trust them on that because it was a range of issues. Like, it was a range of issues that the Conservatives really failed on. It was not just my immigration. And they really wanted to deal with migration. There was stuff that they could have done. And they just did not do it. Time and time again, they failed all this and they decided to blame all their woes instead of blaming it on the EU as they used to do. Oh, well, it's just immigration, which then drew attention to all those immigration figures, which then gave Nigel Farage just practically unlimited ammo just to then unleash on them in 2019 as well. Well, in the last election as well. As Gavin Rice obviously explained, immigration was the number one reason in the massive 42-point loss in the vote share amongst the vote leave that saw our July back in July. 40% of the defectors from the 2019 named it as the largest barrier for voting Conservative again. No wonder Nigel Farage is so happy to dance with Patel. The appalling record is what drove Reforms UK's surge in support. No, it's not. That includes that. You know, Nigel is happy in some reason. Bear in mind, if Farage ever became prime minister, he will not sort out this. He would allow migration to continue just so that he could keep it as some sort of thing he could churn while making it look like he's doing something on this. And he's also should be asking larger questions like why did these policies fail? What exactly were the numerous problems? And again, was immigration really that big of an issue? Like, was it actually seriously the biggest contributor to some of the problems that he mentioned? Again, doesn't ask these questions because, again, it would need to be a deeper and big fundamental understanding of a ton of different range of stuff going on in the Conservative Party. Drove and drives. They were, of course, not only were shattered, of course, our 2019 promises, but it ripped up and, of course, stamped on it. We tripled net migration from levels that caused our country to then vote for Brexit and hoped that our supporters wouldn't notice. Why should they trust us ever again? How can they ever be banked on to control or reduce immigration? Farage can just point and laugh and count his blessings. Well, again, was Brexit really about fully immigration? It made it seem it. But if Brexit was meant to be about controlling immigration, and we've now done Brexit and it can't control immigration, then now you have to ask the question, well, was Brexit a good idea? Will can't actually even ask that own question himself on that. But there you go. Badenoch does, of course, understand how existential these issues is for our party. Even if she seemed to be the only person in SW1 not to have read the excellent CPS paper on this topic from last year, such as she was offered now a milquetoast mea culpa that our party still lacks a coherent analysis of actually what went wrong and, of course, what we would do differently. This is into the void which now Reform very happily leaps. Yep, they're not going to do anything differently. They can't even actually find out what they went wrong or why they went wrong. Because they daren't do it. You know, the Conservatives would have to look into a mirror, and every time they do that, they just balk at the idea. It was something else. It was immigration. We weren't conservative enough. Anyway, I have, of course, the impression that Badenoch, of course, doesn't wholly grasp what the voters understand by policy. Not, of course, it's 100-page documents, but it is essentially that they are any punitive project for 2029 and for keeping my think tank chums especially employed. It is what Farage, of course, offers, a diagnosis and a cure. He's not diagnosing any problems, nor is he offering a cure. That's a very fundamental misunderstanding of Nigel Farage and his politics and what he's offered, but there you go. If we lack those, of course, our poll ratings will continue to deteriorate and Reform will now eat our lunch. This is especially true if Badenoch plans to avoid policy announcements until 2027. For the 9th time, politics is being played at 10th time speed. We are in a third now trending downwards, and we have no time to indulge in the Thatcher Joseph cosplay that the shadow cabinet might yearn for. Our party is in a death spiral, a descent into irrelevance, and voters have just simply stopped listening. Probably never true words that Will has spoken about his party there. Absolutely true. Will gets that his party's in a death spiral. He's the only Conservative I've actually seen, or at least willing Conservative commentator, actually say that our party is in a death spiral, and if we are not careful, we are going to die. We are ever more declining into irrelevance. Voters just aren't listening to us. He's right on that, but No one else seems to be listening to him. So at least I will give Will, he gets it right about his party when he says that. So the rot must be stopped and fast. Badenoch must build on her previous speech to make a wholehearted denunciation of the Boris wave and a full-bodied apology for Johnson's and Patel's makes. She must make a very series of clear commitments, building back on the work of Neil O'Brien, Robert Jerrick, Carl Williams, Guy Dampier, and others to start to show that we are repentant. She ain't going to do that. She ain't going to do that at all, because that would mean, well, maybe bringing Robert Jerrick into a position of power. And of course, what's Robert Jerrick going to do? Well, eventually he's going to be sharpening his knife, ready to stab her in the back when the time comes. Anyway, whether, of course, this will be enough to buy as a hearing for the voters can't, of course, be known until Badenoch tries it. If she does not, on mass defections to reform will continue, and Tory MPs, members, and supporters will have to confront reality that we are on track to become a minor party. Plugging now into the latest polls into electoral calculus almost makes Patel's interview look good by comparison. Again, you haven't even asked the fundamental question. Why has Patel been brought in? On that note, we now return to the question, which I opened with. Why, with all the baggage that she brings, did Badenoch think she would give Patel a senior role? This interview was inevitability from the moment she was appointed. If Badenoch is going to hug those close with this type of reputation for the twin disasters of the Boris wave and our election defeat, she must explain why and for what benefit. Strange how that was meant to be the question you opened with, and you did open with it, fair enough, but most of it went on to be then complaining about Kimmy Badenoch, not Priti Patel. Once again, showing you that Will really does not like Kimmy Badenoch. Anyway, let's finish this off. We, of course, cannot be under new management if voters are now seeing the very same politicians defending the same appalling record that caused them to boot us out only 6 months ago. Patel had her chance and failed. Badenoch may not want to reshuffle her shadow cabinet, but interviews like this make it an inevitability. Yesterday's men and women have no place in the brave new right. Good luck with that. um, someone says, yeah, here. Someone says here, your summary of, quote, being sacked as international development secretary doesn't quite cut it. Meeting with Israeli officials without the prime minister approval would be bad enough, but the full story includes the details and locations and now outcomes of the meeting. And it was bad. It was really, really bad when that happened. That's why she got an absolute drubbing when this came out. Absolute drubbing of this when this came out. Someone else says here, as a Jewish woman, I remember what a far right party and a government used to do. I remember what a far right party and a government do to a country. I used to be proud to be in the Tory party, but at the moment, I am not. All I hear is hate speech, blame directed at anyone who doesn't look white or isn't of a different religion. It shouldn't matter where you come from or your religion. We all live together in this country. And for years, we got on well until the financial crisis, the pandemic, and all the wars that started. Brexit has now divided the country as well. And as a country, we need to work together with the EU and other countries, not just ourselves. That woman is clearly in the wrong party. maybe go join the Liberal Democrats. You might find a better party there overall. The prediction now based on opinion polls from the 30th of January to the 1st of Feb. The possibility now of outcomes. Labour minority at 46%, no roll control at 14, Labour majority at 14, Reform majority at 13, Con minority at 10, Reform majority at 2. See, are there any good more ones going on here? And that's the other thing. They haven't mentioned anything about Trump's tariffs. I wonder if they'll talk about that soon, but maybe we'll cover that if that happens. Oh, this might be interesting. As I've said before, William is just naive. Ooh, that's fighting talks, that, Fernando. Some of the comments in this article are, of course, classic examples. He writes that we need to offer more policies. What is it that Farage actually offers? A diagnosis and a cure. This is exactly what he fails to offer. People want lower taxes, so he offers 90 billion in tax cuts. People want additional spending, so he offers 50 billion in extra expenditure. People want a free NHS, so he promises healthcare free at the point of delivery. This is not a cure, it's just populist nonsense. We all know what Badenoch actually wants. She outlines it every PMQs. It is to that end our dependence on immigration, as well as educated and skilled young workforce. It is lower taxes. It is flexible labor laws. It is encouraging growth. But she realizes this takes us nowhere without coherent policies that don't contradict each other. No wonder the country is in the state it's in, with bright commentators insist now on instant answers, disparage proper analysis, and are bowled over by charlatan peddling of now superficial solutions, not because they have a chance of working, but because they are just what people want to hear. um, bear in mind, even what I'd say this guy said here, I don't think people want lower taxes or want tax cuts. But good luck on that. um, Someone else says, yeah. First of all, who in the hell is William Atkinson? I do not recall seeing his name against anything positive, and he appears to be yet another backstabber that our party has been infected with for far too long. We, the members, have had just enough of people like dear Will, who have consistently vetoed our choices and placed our party in this result. In a position that now finds itself. We are desperately in need of a period of constant incorporation between those at the top, not more division. And it would do Brother Bill a world of good to bear that in mind. um, that will be interesting. People turning against Will. That's a first. That's a first. Someone says here, a great article. I believe Mr. Atkinson actually represents the views of the majority of the voting population. It would feel sick to see any grotesque kind of cabal contemporary Tory MP back in government. Millions of people have had years to observe the egotistical, narcissistic incompetence. Ooh. Again, why not call them that, Will? Why not call them that yourself? Whether, of course, they label themselves centre left, right, or the loony ERG, they are finished. I and millions of voters could no longer bear to see them back in power or to continue inflicting their carnage and chaos on our country. It is a country who now will decide their fate, not the Tory membership who inflicted Johnson, Truss, and Sunak upon us. I have never been a Tory party member, but more importantly, I have followed and voted Conservative most of my life, as have generations of my family. Until the Organtine stables are clear of the dross, I shall never vote for them. Neither shall most of my friends and families. I believe this is a generation of decent people out there with intelligence and integrity who will once again bring back decent, honest integrity and, of course, competence back to our political life. Well, who actually do have, a competent and decent, political one for once. It's kind of a nice sea change. It's a very nice sea change. You do notice I'm not constantly having to talk about the wild and crazy stuff that's going on in Parliament half the time because it's not there anymore. They're not in power anymore, and quite frankly, it's just so very nice. Anyway, this would, of course, now regenerate the passion for now decent Conservative Party, whom, of course, we will be very proud to campaign and vote for. Perhaps Mr. Atkinson may be one of those excellent, honest generation of the new Tories without the egotistical baggage and the narcissistic tendencies. We, the voters of the country, are, of course, willing to wait for you. Forget Labour, the Lib Dems, and Reform. Find an intelligent Conservative Party for British patriots. Someone else here. I believe Mr. Atkinson actually represents the views of majority voting population. Evidence would suggest he does not. It's very true. I think that's really it now. I think that's it, unfortunately. Yes, someone else says here. Rather amusing, on the 5th anniversary of Brexit, the German Bundestag has now collapsed into infighting and acrimony of the open borders and crime, and the French have now been paralysed for nearly a year, and the FTO have now taken over with a huge poll lead in Austria. Wilders, of course, in charge in Holland. Then, a very weird, just take of European politics. Of course, Germany's in a bit of trouble. It's not collapsed, but there you go. Your Brexit has been a disaster, and you spend your days making excuses for it. Yep. So this is what's this? Oh, stats for Leicester's latest poll. Again, I don't think this is going to happen at the moment. I think when it actually comes to a proper general election, Reform winning that many seats, don't think so. Don't think so. Because if they ever did get in, bear in mind, if let's say that actually happened, let's play that out that they got those 283 seats. Farage is in charge now. Like Farage is in charge. He's got nowhere to hide. He is prime minister. It's his policies, his stuff that is in charge now. You're seeing what's happening in America with like Trump fully unleashed. Oh, the Reform voters, I'm sure, would be ecstatic with some form of jubilation that their man has finally got in. Most people would have probably voted for Reform basically because they either couldn't bring themselves to vote for Labour and Conservative and thought, well, maybe we'll give Farage a chance. They would regret it very quickly. Very quickly. Very, very quickly indeed. And it would be the ultimate disinfectant. Dragging Reform into power, it would absolutely destroy economically the United Kingdom. It would leave us into so many ruinous places. But I'll tell you what, Reform would be done after a term in government. They would be done. There would be no coming back for them because people would see for what they are. People would massively see for what they are. But like I say, that no, not going to happen. Do, 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 do. I think that's it, really, for stuff there from Will. But yeah, let me know what you think on this and Will's little revelation, because you seem to come so close so many times. Seems to come so close to like a revelation that maybe the party is bad, incompetent, and narcissistic. But oh, it's not my section of the party. My section would never be like that. Robert Jerrick would never be like that. Oh, sweet William, please keep on continue being this sweet summer child. Just so entertaining. You're so entertaining. But as always, let me know what you think down below. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.